Ladies and gentlemen, this is how Collingwood get Dan Houston into the black and white for 2025. What do we know about Dan Houston? He plays for Port Adelaide, he's 27 years old, a two-time All-Australian and a premium illustrious halfback flanker, which is a highly desired player to play that role that has, I guess, been integral in the transcendence of AFL footy, moving from long kicks down the line to running fast dashing runners off the half-back line who can use the ball really well and get handball receives to create overlapping runs into the midfield. Dan Houston is that guy. He doesn't mind the goal himself either. This year, he's averaged 23 disposals and 5 score involvements per game. The 5 score involvements per game is a massive emphasis point in what I've just mentioned, because to be able to generate 5 score involvements off the half-back line is a dime a dozen. And Josh Dacos has been able to emulate that over the course of his stint off the half-back line. So if we can get them two in tandem, wow, what a team Collingwood would look like. And what else do we know about Dan Houston? He's a Victorian, out of the final series despite Port being in it due to the suspension that was handed upon him for the knock on Isaac Rankin, which is unfortunate. There's been plenty of rumours about Dan Houston wanting out and wanting to return back home to Victoria, and what better club than a destination club in Collingwood, playing in front of big crowds and being around generational players in Scott Pendlebury, Nick Dacos, so on and so forth. So there is a case to be made there. But logistically, what does this look like? Houston is contracted to Port until 2027. So Port will play hard to get. And the other question is, besides the trading, which we'll get into, which is what you're here for, can we afford to pay someone like Dan Houston? What is his contract like right now at Port Adelaide? And with our veterans like Pendlebury, Sidebottom, Howe, Hoskin, Elliott all signing one-year extensions at a lesser contract to allow to make room for acquisitions of players like Dan Houston's caliber, I'm wondering how much the Brodie Grundy and Adam Treloar effect hinders our payroll right now when we do want to look at big-time players like Houston. You know, there's Christian Petrarca, and then in that next tier, you're talking about players like Dan Houston, given the importance of his role, which I've alluded to just before. Can he force his way out of South Australia? Does he play I hate to say it, does he play the mental health card? Does he want to go home? Does he want to be closer to family? I think that carries some weight in the economy, or not the economy, but the way the world works at the moment. We're very sensitive, so clubs have to really be diligent and tiptoe around these matters when mental health comes into it. So that's something for you guys to consider at home. I know some of you aren't going to like me bringing that up, but that is the truth and that is the reality of where we're at in this world. How do we get Dan Houston to Collingwood? My trade scenario is we get John Noble to Gold Coast for pick 20, and we bundle that with Joe Richards, who Port have offered a 4-year deal to him. And we also give them pick 32, one of our second round picks, and a future second. I'm very reluctant to give our future first for next year for many reasons. One of them being we can't give away our future first for next year because we need to stockpile that and bundle that together for Thomas McGuan as a prospective top 5 player in next year's draft pool as a father-son. So we have to be extremely careful with how we go about that. And with the new draft rules, maybe I'll make a completely separate video for this, but with the draft rules, next year, for example, we can bundle our 2025 first round pick, our 2026 first round pick, and our 2027 first round pick to trade for players, right? The caveat is you must use 2 of your first round picks either every 4 years or 5 years. So I'd like us to utilize our first round pick next year, and that could be one of the 4 years where we've used our first round pick rather than trading it away. Hopefully that makes sense, but we'll definitely dive deeper into that in a later video because that just is a whole nother conversation. Port at the moment have a very short draft hand. They have pick 37 and pick 55. So whether they want to build on some of their draft stock, granted, looking at their average age, they're 25.7 is their average age right now. So they're probably still building towards their premiership window and probably don't need to add to their draft stocks. But if Dan Houston wants out and they want to honour his request, then they have no choice but to build upon those draft stocks and perhaps use that elsewhere. Whether they have academy players that even have an academy, or if they want to use that to trade elsewhere. Maybe, like, I don't think they can get Dan Rioli, so they really don't want to lose Dan Houston. That's completely understandable. How this helps Collingwood, we talk about the ball movement. It's been diabolical for Collingwood this year. We went in 2023 from being the number one defensive half ball movement side when it comes to scoring origins. This year we finished in the bottom four. Granted, we made some work to improve that in the latter stages of the year with the move of Josh Dacos and John Noble, which is why it's a shame that John Noble is leaving, because I think his best position and best role is to be the second best ball user coming out of the back line. But if he wants to go to Gold Coast for family reasons, and so be it, and we just got to try make sense of how we can get someone like Dan Houston, because I really, really like that idea in the way the game is played these days. And pairing with Josh Dacos, wow. And who knows, if Houston goes into the back line, that might give Josh Dacos more freedom to play in the midfield or midfield wing role. And then if TJ is somewhat ready, which I don't think he'll be ready for another couple of years, Harry Di Mattia is also going to be putting his hand up. Quaynor is not a running half-backer. He is an intercept defender who can play small and tall. And then we have to come to accept that Nick Dacos is probably not going to play on a half back line ever again. He has resided in the midfield and he's developed a really good knack to roll forward and kick goals and create real problems in that forward line. And that's going to be something we want to utilise and expose against other teams as much as possible, because people don't seem to have an answer for Nick Dacos coming off the half forward line. Heck, he's been in the goal square at times and still sends shivers down opposition coaches' spines. So that's why we probably won't see Nick Dacos there. I've called for Jack Crisp this year to go back to the half back line, but before that, he's been in the midfield, he's been on the wing, and he's been in the half forward line. He has not started off the half back line, if at all, this year. So I don't know if that gets revisited, especially if we lose Noble and we don't get someone like Dan Houston. Is our hand forced and we have to get Jack Crisp back there to provide options? Am I still in focus? Yes, I'm still here. And then, yeah, like I said, TJ, Harry Di Mattia, Quaynor, probably not ready or not suitable for that specific role. But man, there's been heaps of trade rumours. This can only end well for Collingwood in the sense that we acquire someone handy. I think if we can get Markeen with pick 48, pick 50 for some cheap value, and then we get someone like Dan Houston on the higher end of value, then that would really shore up our defensive woes. And I think that's our biggest problem. We've talked about key forwards in the past, but I think with Darcy Cameron adding the string to play forward, we know he's always had that ability, but he's shown it more so. Even against Melbourne, he looked like a really good leading up key forward, which is crazy. And then Dan McStay's come back and he's looked like he has missed no time with his ACL and is playing really good footy. Myercheck will come back fit, looking to have an impact and show that he's still got it after an injury-riddled year. Mason Cox had a massive game against Brisbane or Sydney, had 5 contested marks, so he's an option going forward. And then what do we do with Reef McInnes, Ash Johnson and Nathan Kruger? Where do they fall in this picture? Yet to receive contracts for Kruger, and I think McInnes, let me just quickly see where McInnes is at, but nevertheless, he's not a key tall forward, so I'm not even going to go down that route. It's more the Nathan Krugers and Ash Johnsons we're worried about. Ash Johnson's still got a year on his contract. Does he get plucked away for nothing to another club and have a fresh start? I think that's probably best for him. But that's all I've got for you. Let me know in the comment section below, do you like the idea of Dan Houston? And what is your hypothetical when it comes to trying to get someone like Dan Houston in a trade window? Go Pies.